Hello and welcome to another Drive-In Double Feature. I'm Ryan.
I'm Nathan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into anything, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast@gmail.com. Just a couple of off-the-cuff conversations with Nathan, some games, fun memories, maybe a guest every now and then, who knows. Just something we want to give extra to you supporters out there. If you'd like to support with us, head on over there. If not, it doesn't affect any regular content, and we still appreciate you nonetheless. But anyway, today, on Thursday, we're going to be talking about 1968's The Night of the Living Dead. This is the last movie we're doing for Halloween month.
Yeah,
and I can't believe it's over already.
So fast. It went by so fast. So little. It feels like we barely even touched horror movies. And unfortunately, October's the only time you can watch horror movies.
No, can't watch any more for the rest of the year, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's just the rules, people.
But I am excited for December to watch Die Hard.
Yeah. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I almost agreed with you.
Nathan, it's a Christmas movie. It's on everybody's. Everybody says they love Christmas movies, but not as much as I love Die Hard.
All right. So if Die Hard's a Christmas movie, that means Night of the Living Dead's a Halloween movie, which it is not. It does not take place on Halloween. So it's not a Halloween movie.
Well, then let's just cancel this episode.
Okay. I'm just kidding.
Anyway, until next time. No.
I'm kidding. It's horror. Night of the Living Dead gets to be a horror Halloween movie.
All right. Well, you graciously allowed it. Thank you.
Yes.
But, anyway, this is probably the most famous zombie movie ever made. It's not the first one, though. It's not the first. But zombie had a much different definition. There was one where it was like it was a hypnotized, somebody that got hypnotized that could be considered a zombie, or just some type of undead creature, but it wasn't the type of the tropes that we had seen before.
I think this is the first ever flesh-eating zombie, is the way they put it.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. That was one of the differentiators. They said, what can we do to set these apart? And they settled on cannibalism.
Yeah.
As you do.
Yeah, that's the go-to. But
it very basic plot is just this woman, Barbara, and her brother Johnny are making a visit to their father's grave, and then some zombies show up, and then where it gets kicked off right away, and they're trying to survive the night. That's the whole plot.
Yep, it's literally just a survival in one night movie. I have a confession to make as somebody who's seen a lot of movies. I had never seen this movie before. I did own it because I thought the cover was cool. I've seen the first 20 minutes, and this is going to be funny, on Second Life. Because I remember there's a big trend where Second Life was going to be the future where you can make money on there. And my dad was like, make an account, try to figure it out. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And I logged in. I walked into a theater in Second Life, and they were showing Night of the Living Dead. I watched like 20 minutes of it, and I think I logged out. Wow.
So did you make a big disturbance when you walked out?
Yeah, I was like, screw this, screw you. George, I'm gonna send George Romero an email.
BRBTTLYYL.
Yeah, but I'm assuming, Ryan, that you've seen Night of the Living Dead before.
This is my third time watching it. I saw it originally by itself. Then I watched it again with the Riff Tracks version.
Okay, nice.
I guess that counts as a watch, but
kinda.
And then I watched it again, and it's great. I like it a lot.
It's a good movie. Yeah, very, very good movie. It has that classic status for a reason, and I watched it twice for this podcast, and I liked it more the second time around, and I watched them in concurrent days. it's got that good. It's got a really good mood to it, and I can't believe the low budget on this, because they do some cool stuff in this movie for such a low budget.
For a period of time, this was the most profitable movie ever made, I believe. Like it was, they made it for about six figures, about 100,000, I think, something like that.
Yeah, about 100,000.
And they made millions off of it. So
yeah. And unfortunately, I don't think anybody really made money off of this movie due to them doing copyright incorrectly for this movie.
Yeah, they said, well, one, it was like, I mean, these people were so inexperienced on how to make actual features. So, I mean, George Romero, him and his whole crew made this movie. And before this, they were like commercial directors. Like they'd be hired to make a bunch of different commercials, which I don't know if you watch any of the special features, but there was one special feature where it was talking about their commercial company, and it showed a lot of the commercials that they made like before this movie. And there's one that's like a Fantastic Voyage ripoff, but it's like inside of a washing machine pretending to be laundry detergent, like cleaning clothes. But
I like it.
But so it was kind of like them just getting together, like they want to make this movie, and so much so that like almost every person you see in this movie is somebody involved with the production behind the scenes too. Like Johnny, he's one of the producers of the movie. The main human antagonist character, Harry Cooper, he's one of the producers of the movie. One of the writers, John Russo, is one of the zombies. So it's a lot of different people were like working very hard on this movie, and they were so excited. So one fact I did read, which was kind of cool, was they were so excited that after they got done editing this movie, they literally went out like the night it was done editing, and they would just drive around to random theaters, seeing if anybody would show their movie.
That's funny. That I love that, like ragtag, like we just got together to make a movie kind of deal. Back when it was a little bit harder to make a movie because you actually had to have film and everything. But yeah, I mean, so I guess getting into the movie, like you said, the movie starts brother and sister going to the grave. And even this opening, I think, has kind of an eerie mood to it. It has that line, that notable line of "They're coming to get you, Barbara," the one that you referenced, and there's just something about it.
I don't know. I really like that scene a lot, and it's because it's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. But it's like I said, they're at a cemetery. It's Barbara and her brother Johnny. They're visiting their father's grave, and there's this real ominous music like leading up to them going to the cemetery, and then right before they get out of the car, like Johnny turns on the radio, and you can kind of hear like a news broadcast about something going down, but he kind of cuts it off too fast before they're able to realize what's going on. They're kind of just having like Johnny's complaining a bunch because he's like, why do we have to drive all the way out here? And Barbara's like, oh, this is our father, we got to, do this. Our mother wanted us to. And Johnny's just complaining the whole time, clearly doesn't want to be there, thinks this is a huge waste of time, even though it's his dad. And Barbara's taking this super serious. She's trying to mourn her father's death. And then Johnny all of a sudden starts making a big joke, they're coming to get you, Barbara. And he's like, oh, look, there's one of them now. And it's just, at first you think it's just this lonely older guy like wandering a cemetery, but then he comes out of nowhere and attacks the both of them.
And he actually attacks them. And I'm sure this was, I mean, Night of the Living Dead going into it, I'm sure audiences knew kind of what they're getting into, but I mean, they've never seen anything quite like this, because I mean, 1968 was still a very different landscape for movies and horror movies in general, because it doesn't get brutal or anything, but it is kind of visceral. They do fight. The zombie is all over him, and gets him down and cracks his head.
Oh yeah. And that's so you don't really know what, I mean, you find out later that he died, but in
Yeah.
that sequence, but you don't know at first. And you know, if you put in the context of those types of scenes, like you don't really know how zombies are made, because you know now it's like it's so like, oh, you get bitten by a zombie, you're going to turn into a zombie, or you know, you die like in a certain way, like you can turn into a zombie. And that's so it's like a big shocker, spoiler alert, when Johnny shows up later as a zombie. So it's kind of a cool little moment. But um, just to show you again about how cheap this movie was, is the car that they use is actually the guy that plays Johnny. That's his mother's car, and they had to use that car like on on each day, and like in between those days, like his mother was using the car to go to work and stuff. Um, and then in the middle of shooting, she actually had gotten into a car accident where somebody hit her front fender. And so they're like, oh, what are we going to do? This is going to ruin continuity. So they actually filmed the scene where the car crashes into a tree just to make up for that.
A very slow crash too. It kind of coasts down a hill into the tree, and it makes this like sound effect. I mean, it's fine. I think it's not like unbelievable or anything. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, this character arc though of Barbara, she gets away from this, ends up in the house and everything, but she just slowly goes crazy throughout the whole movie. Like who is supposed to be our main character just loses her mind and just becomes almost silent.
One thing, so like one of the things that kind of pushes her over that edge is she literally gets chased into a house, like you had said, and then she goes upstairs and she's trying to see if anybody's in the house, and then there's this body that's just been like torn apart, and it looks like, you know, there's a skull there that's all bloody looking, and she screams. And that shot of that dead body, that's one that like I always remember when I see this movie. Like that's one like I always have that image of that corpse in there. And
yes, yeah,
Barbara throughout the rest of this movie is just so shell shocked, like, and I mean, to me though, it's you know, there you can make the argument like, oh, that's like a lame character, like Barbara doesn't do anything or whatever. But you know, at the same time, because I try to always think about what would you do in these types of, or what would I do in these situations, and you know, you can kind of have a game plan of like, oh, I would do this, I would do that, but really, once the chips are down and you're actually in that situation, you don't know what you're going to do.
No, yeah, if zombies were real, you know, it'd be like, everyone's like, oh, if I survived, you know, I would do this. No, I mean, most people are going to try to fight, but in the zombie situation, most people die and become zombies. But,
it's the same situation where it's like guys in the military, like they train to like go fight in war for all the way up in boot camp, and like they think they're ready, but then once like they're actually in the heat of battle, it's like they totally freeze.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different feeling. And yeah, no, I think Barbara's character is needed. I think it kind of displays like the trauma in this situation. That's what I like about this movie. This movie, very anti what I would think a Hollywood setup would be. It's more a negative movie. It's a very negative movie. It does not have a positive outlook on like anything. It's really depressing, and I like that. You know, you have hopes, you have wishes for these characters, but it ultimately is just like a downer the whole time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I mean, it doesn't ever get better for these characters. It just everything just gets progressively worse as the movie goes on. And Barbara, she's by herself for a little bit, but then we get our main protagonist of the movie, the hero of the story, and that is Ben, which is a black gentleman. And I only make that specification because it's one of the first movies where they actually had like a main black character as a hero protagonist.
Yeah, and it doesn't bring up race at all, because they had movies like that, but it was always about race. Night of the Living Dead doesn't even bring up that he's black once. And I mean, they always credit that to, they just hired him because he was the best actor, and they didn't change the script at all for him. So,
well, No, I read something different. Is that the character of Ben was well, they more based the character of Ben on like his personality, like
Well, yeah. No, I read that like, well, it wasn't him. I think it was Dwayne himself, the actor, went through and changed it himself to make him less because I guess he's supposed to be a trucker and kind of mean, but toned it down. But they didn't change the script to add anything that he's black.
yeah, and that's like what you said. It's more the character himself is more like the actor himself. So
Yes,
it's because Dwayne Jones, he's an educated man. He would teach college courses all the time. So very very educated person, very pragmatic type of thinker, which I always like that. I really like the Ben character a lot because
yeah.
I mean, right when he is like in the middle of all this like chaos going on in the like out in the outside world, he runs into the house and he immediately just like springs into action. And like Barbara's just kind of like just standing there like, oh, like totally frozen. He's like, we gotta do this. Come on, we gotta board up the windows and like.
Yeah, and I think he's a great character, but there is that one questionable scene where she's like freaking out and he just like punches her in the face.
Oh.
And I mean, it's to calm her down because she's freaking out. You see that a lot in these older movies, but his punch looks like Dexter.
No, I was about to say, like, it's not like an open fist slap. He like full on like closed fist like punches her right in the face.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. Like totally just and like knocks her out cold. And then later through the rest of the movie, she just has this like huge mark on her face, like her whole cheek is swollen. And it's like,
and for Southern audiences, if you saw this like in the South or like, I don't know, just something of this black dude like punching a white woman, I'm sure people were very unhappy about this scene. Very, I guess, different for the time. I wonder what the reaction was like in the South for this movie. Because
probably not great.
Yeah, probably not great. Hey, it still made a lot of money. So
yeah, but no, I mean it's like the actor Dwayne Jones. There's an interview because apparently he didn't really give a whole lot of interviews ever, and he never really talked about this one. He did a couple of acting roles outside of this movie, but very rarely did he acknowledge that he was in these movies. And they just said like he was just a real private type of guy. He never really wanted to put himself out there like that. And he wanted to make sure hey, that was just a movie, that was just a role that I did. But he did say though that he appreciated a lot of the acclaim that he got and everything, so he didn't hate any of these movies, but he's one of those that I think he just doesn't adore these movies like some actors, like when they do them where they're like, oh, I love that movie, give me my start or whatever. He kind of has that Harrison Ford type of thing where it's like, it was just a job, I did it, if you like me, great.
Yeah, exactly. I did my role kind of deal. And hey, he does it well. One of the biggest surprises, I felt like I knew this movie because it's one of those movies that you hear about or see clips from. I was wondering where the other characters come into play. I didn't realize that they were in the basement the whole time of this house, that they're like boarding up and running around. And then there's a man, a woman, their child, and then like a young couple in the basement, and they were too scared to come up. But they eventually this is where the movie really like it starts to get really like tense, not because of the zombies, but because these human characters are bickering with each other the whole time.
Yeah, and I think that started to get done a lot differently in other movies where, like in zombie movies, it was like the zombies weren't the real bad guys. It was like the people you had to deal with besides the zombies, which is kind of like that Walking Dead approach or whatever. But you don't really realize though that what the extent that these people are going to go to, like, because you kind of have these preconceived notions. I would guess, like in that time frame, like, oh, they're going to band together and they're going to fight this together, but the due to circumstances later in the movie, like they Ben ends up murdering one of them, and that's just for self-preservation more than anything, not because he hates the guy or whatever, but like the guy, the main bad antagonist character, his name is Harry, and he's all about like keeping his family safe, his wife and his daughter safe, but to like their own detriment too. Like he's willing to sacrifice his relationship with everybody else to keep them safe, and he's willing to sacrifice their safety too, because they say, Ben is kind of like of the mind that, hey, we need to stay upstairs. All the food and stuff is up here. And if we can see where the zombies are coming from, we have a much better chance of surviving. And then Harry, on the other hand, is like, no, we need to stay down in the cellar, because if we lock the door, then they can't get in at all.
Yeah. And, but then like, the arguments like, oh, there's only one entry. If they get in, we're screwed. But I think what's funny about this is, of course, you root for Dwayne here because he's very, very vocal about wanting to be in the cellar. It's almost like very attacking in a way, like my way, or it's nothing. And, but he almost ends up being right in the end, because at the end of the movie, I mean, this is skipping ahead, that main character, Ben, that's where he hides out. He ends up hiding out in the basement. It's like, oh, wow, the main antagonist was correct the whole time of what they should have done.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Antagonist was right all along.
Yeah. Once again, another negative outlook throughout this movie. But yeah, they have a daughter. This is the start of that trope of, oh, we have someone who was bit by a zombie, but we don't really want to do anything about it. We'll just keep them downstairs. But they also didn't know. They didn't know that she was going to turn into a zombie herself.
No.
Yeah.
They didn't know. Because they eventually get the TV working in the house, and they're able to watch some of the news broadcasts. And they do say that at one point that like people that were dead were coming alive, or anybody that had been bitten were turning into zombies, but they didn't really know the extent. And what I really like though is that we don't really know any of these characters' histories, but their personalities are so different from each other that we can kind of figure out what they're all about. Like, you can kind of figure out like Harry is really stubborn and he doesn't really ever want to be wrong. Like I said, like Ben is kind of like this no nonsense, very pragmatic, like, I like thinking everything really logically. Harry's wife is what I like about them, they bring it up in the one of the documentaries that I watched, is that you can just tell like how worn out she is by Harry's personality. She's just like, he's like, don't they know we're trying to stay, like Harry's like, don't they know, I know I'm trying to keep everyone safe. And she's like, and right. And like, isn't that the most important thing? And
yeah, they definitely have a very estranged relationship. Almost, it sounds like a couple on the verge of divorce.
Which they might have been, but
yeah.
And then you got the two younger couple, which is just kind of like this younger guy. He's like kind of doesn't know which direction to go into, because he's kind of decided if he should stay in the cellar or stay up in the house. And then his girlfriend doesn't really have a well thought out personality. But
yeah, if there was like one thing I could point out in this movie, it's her character is very like, she's kind of the one that watches the kid, like whenever they need the other characters out. It's like, oh, you go downstairs, watch the kid, so she's not alone.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, and she kind of ruins it for everybody a little bit, because, and I hate to say that, but they have a truck that's outside, and there's a gas pump, because this is like on a farm, but they do have a gas pump on the farm. And they're like, well, if we can just drive the car over to the gas pump and fill it up, maybe we'll have a fighting chance.
Yeah.
And when it's Ben and the young couple that's there, and at first they're able to start filling the car up with gas. But then Ben is like fighting the zombies off with a torch, and he drops it, and the car catches on fire, and she's in the truck, and she's like, "Oh, my jacket's caught on the car seat," and then her boyfriend leaps in there, and then the truck explodes with both of them in it. But I don't know, but I mean, if I was in like a life or death situation, you couldn't keep any amount of clothes on me. Like I would with whatever.
Exactly. If like my entire wardrobe was stuck in the seat, I don't care. I don't have to hide myself. I'm surviving, But no, modesty was big in '68. Women always had to wear a jacket. So I'm just kidding.
Yes, but that to me was like kind of like the one dumb moment where I'm like, come on, like
it's big, right? Because like it felt like maybe an easy way to kill that character, kill those characters to get it down. Because that's what sucks. You get so excited because they get that truck out there, and they get it, like they get to the pump, they get the keys. It's like a whole ordeal. And they orchestrate this whole thing just for it to just blow up right in their face and kill two people. And the death of two people was not even necessary in the end. It was, like they get so close and it just like, poof, it's gone.
Yeah, just like takes their one last ray of hope away, because that was like the only way they would have been able to escape the house.
Yeah, because that's they're not surrounded by like one or two zombies. It's like a horde of zombies are surrounding the place. Because I mean, they have the lights on and everything.
Yeah, I really like those zombies because it's not like before. It's not like now where now you got to have like layers and layers of prosthetic like makeup, where they're like, oh, well, this one's missing a hand, this one's missing its jawbone, or what, it's like you got to get real elaborate. Now it's just like, oh, there's some blood on this guy's forehead, and
it just looks like a person.
This guy's jacket's a little dirty.
Oh, this one eats an insect. All right.
But they do some gross stuff. Like there's like these intestine looking things and like raw meat and they're eating. That one was pretty gross. But
I forget what they did to the intestines, but I guess when they first filmed it, someone on set said it looked too lifeless, which is funny because they're pig intestines out of a dead animal. But they like had to fill it up with stuff to make it look more real. There's also nudity in this movie, super surprising for '68. I was surprised by that. Now, I mean, the zombies are cool. Like the little girl in the basement, we already given it away. She becomes a zombie. One of the most iconic looks in this, like that, like always gets shown in pictures and stuff. This is a little girl with like black eyes, and she's eating her dad's arm and stabs her mom. And it's like, it's interesting because zombies now, you wouldn't think they would, in most movies, they aren't smart enough to pick up a trowel and stab somebody, but she does it. And then the mom's scream effect is, I don't understand why they did that with where she's screaming and it echoes.
It echoes and they pitch it very high.
Yeah.
Too. Like it sounds like she's squealing, and then and then they just like repeat it over again, like, and it echoes. It's but I mean, I guess it was probably one of the most horrific things you could see, like a little girl murdering her mother. But
yeah, and I mean, it was an actual kid doing it, so I mean, I understand it. It's not that bothering to me. It's just kind of an interesting choice in a movie that doesn't really have anything like that.
No, I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, that was interesting, but
yeah. But I mean, that's when everything falls apart pretty much. Once those two characters die, they start coming into the house. Dwayne there's trying to bar up the door, and the dad doesn't really do anything. And so Dwayne decks him, fights him too.
Oh, well, no, like beforehand, it was Ben was trying to run to the house after the gas pump exploded, and Harry locks the door and doesn't let Ben in, and then Ben has to barge his way in, and that's where he just full on punches him right in the face.
Yeah, and it makes sense. What an asshole. He was just gonna kick him out. It makes no sense. I mean, other than he just wanted the whole place to himself. He wanted to hide in the cellar all by himself.
Well, yeah, and then like because Ben finds a gun and he's been using that throughout the movie, and Harry's like, if I just had that gun, if I just, then I could start calling the shots. And
Hmm.
the towards the end of the movie, when like hell really starts to break loose, and like when the zombies are like right at the front door, uh, Ben drops the gun, and then Harry just kind of leaps over like, that's my gun now. And that's when Ben lunges at him, and Ben takes the gun and just blasts him.
Yeah, kills him. I guess he's just fed up at this point of dealing with this guy. And I mean, at this point, everybody's dead.
Well, yeah. Barbara gets taken by Johnny. Johnny shows up again.
One of the greatest moments is seeing that driver's glove pop in through the door, and you're like, oh, that's Johnny right there, because he wore driving gloves. And, it's just the perfect sign of like, yep, he's back. And of course, Barbara's like, Johnny, and runs to it. The scene done many times in zombie movies.
Yeah. And like you said, then the little girl murders her family, and Ben, like when the little girl comes upstairs where Ben is, and Ben just like throws her like up against the wall, and and then runs down in the cellar. And there's some news broadcasts that like they're getting together some local militia. And this is also like a really famous ending to a movie as well.
It's my favorite part. I think this is like the best part, is just this whole ending sequence, because it's dark. It's very dark, because he sees the militia shows up to the house, and Dwayne sees them and ever so slowly comes upstairs. It's very like slow. They're slowly shooting zombies along the way, and they're like, somebody's in the house. And so Dwayne there, I keep calling him Dwayne, sorry. The character's name is Ben, peeks through the window, and one of the militia dudes shoots him like he's a zombie. Our main character, who is in the zombie, just dies. He just gets killed at the end of the movie. It's so depressing. And then it ends in like newsreel photos, which I think is genius. There's something about it that's so shocking when it's shown just in like a slideshow of his dead body being moved around. It's sad. It's very poignant for a movie where they really try to be like, oh no, we picked him because he's a good actor. We didn't make it about race. That ending really feels very strong for 68, kind of reminiscent of some things going on in the country.
Yeah, it ends on a super dark tone, and it doesn't, it's just kind of like there's no happy ending in this movie at all. And it works out so well because you figure, that militia, they had seen like a bunch of different zombies, and they're just killing real indiscriminately, just like, oh, like that thing's moving, that must be a zombie, just shoot it. And they end up killing a real person. And that's that's just how bad the world is at this point. Like they probably have seen a bunch of stuff already. And as these movies go on, because there are more. There's Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, so it ramps up the levels even more.
Yeah, it does. It becomes even more and more desperate. And we'll have to cover those at some point. But Night of the Living Dead, it's a great movie. If you're like me and you've missed out on it for this long, you check it out. It's a really just great movie.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best black and white horror movies ever. It's and that was another cost-cutting way too, is because they could have made it in color, but it was going to take too long, and it was too expensive to shoot in color back then. And I think it works out really well that they did that this way.
I think it was the right choice. It looks great in black and white, the shadows and everything. I think nothing was lost.
Yeah, but definitely huge recommend. Horror buff, even if you don't love horror, even if you're just looking for something. I mean, because the gore in this is very tame for today's standards.
Oh yeah.
So it's very easy to watch if you're somebody that's a little squeamish. I definitely say give it a shot.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a good like light horror almost. But you want to be depressed. But
who doesn't love to be depressed?
Of course. But no, yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I'm sure there's more we could talk about with Night of the Living Dead, but I think
they-
that wraps it up.
It's one of the most iconic movies ever made. So we could be here all day talking about it and its effect that it's had in the history of cinema. But
Yeah,
we'd be here a lot longer. But Nathan, what are we going to be talking about next time?
we're going to be talking about another James Bond movie. We're already on the third James Bond, and that's Goldfinger. All the James Bond movies are now available on Prime, so you can check out Goldfinger on there.
Sounds great. Can't wait. But if you would like to offer us any thoughts, opinions on the podcast, please email us over at driveindoublefeaturpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DIDFpod. Again, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast. But until next time.
I'm so scared. I don't know if I can. Until next time.